Hello everybody, my name is Mark Applegate. I'm with Innovative Completion Systems, and just want to thank you for giving us a quick moment of your time. We'll be brief, but very excited to show you the latest innovation in the ICSI family of disconnect tools, the SR-ADT. But before we do that, I wanted to say a quick thank you. It's been years of feedback that have been coming back in here at the shop from the field that have led to the development of this new tool. So without you all, this tool just wouldn't have even been possible. Look at the things that you all said you wanted to see in the tool. Were one, you wanted the tool to be shorter. You wanted to be able to stand up to flex of lifting heavier tool strings, more awkward tool strings without having to use a pickup sleeve. And you wanted to be able to tighten through the tool without having to worry about tearing it up. You wanted a tool that was simpler. You wanted something with very little wiring, half the full width, something that had next to no connections that had to be tampered with in the field. You all also wanted to be able to run any company's addressable switch, and you did not want to be forced to throw away any switches every time you do a detonator swap. And you wanted faster detonator swaps, something that could be done very quickly in the field, and something that was going to have less maintenance costs over the life of the tool. Now, all of that being said, there were a few things that we didn't want to deviate from ourselves. One, we wanted to use the same release assembly that we've been using because we know that it works. In fact, our general releasing mechanism we wanted to stick with, because we have years of R&D in that, and feedback coming back in from the field that has went into finding the correct alloys and all the different parts, the correct dimensions and radiuses, all the way down to small modifications and screws and the HEPs. Basically, our mechanism releases when it's supposed to, and it doesn't release when it's not supposed to. So we didn't want to get away from that. Our special carbon steel alloy that we use was something that we didn't want to deviate from. I know a lot of our competitors out there have tried many different alloys of stainless, and at this point we're all starting to see that it's just not strong enough to support continuously lifting heavy, awkward tool strings. I've seen that prolonged use of those parts cause them to stretch just on the microscopic level and want to back off from one another, if not just break and fall apart. So we didn't want to get away from our carbon steel that we've been using. But for those of you who have ran our tools in the past, but maybe not quite so recent, you may have not seen the improvements that we made on that to kind of get the benefits of the stainless while not losing the structural integrity that we gained from the carbon steel. We have been using a coating for some time now that's been proven in the field. It's excellent for abrasion and chemical resistance, so it's something that normally you would just get from a stainless. It's excellent on our threads to prevent galling and cold welding on your threads, and also rust mitigation. It's excellent for parts, mating connections, and also your internal electrical components, where before rust may have been able to allow current to arc across to your case ground and give you a short. Now we don't have that issue with this coating. So you can see there's quite a few things we didn't want to get away from, and for good reason. And we also wanted to make sure that we had the same basic look and feel that our customers were used to with previous versions of the disconnect tool. So how can we possibly meet all the current demands of the marketplace, the things that you all wanted to see in a tool, while not deviating from the things that have made our addressable disconnect tool the most reliable tool out there, and fit it all in a smaller envelope? The answer we finally came up with was the SR-ADT. that shot, you caught a glimpse of our new patent pending detonator cartridge system, but before we get to that, let's take a look at the outside of the tool. Okay, so the first thing that you all notice from that shot, if you're an existing customer of ours with the addressable disconnect tools, is how much shorter the SR model is than previous versions. This tool actually coming in at just under 25 inches on your makeup length, and how we were able to get it down to that length, we'll start at the top of the tool. You'll notice that the switch sub that was on previous models of the tool, this is a CF model ADT that I have back here just for a size comparison. The switch sub housing that we have here has been removed. See, it's no longer there. Now, you can still run anybody's addressable switch, but what we did is we moved the switch to the inside of the actuator, which you'll see here in just a moment. We are currently in developmental stages to add the same capabilities that exist with previous versions of the ADT of running the EB guns, like you have with the CF model. That is unavailable as of right now, but it should be out in about third quarter 2019. But by getting rid of this switch sub, we were able to remove the bulkheads, boots, other connections that were associated with the switch cradles. Those have all been removed, and of course, less connections means less possibility of issues and less possibilities of misruns. Now, one thing that we did have with this switch sub was our seal was here that protected your CCL. To compensate for getting rid of this switch sub, we moved our seal to the inside of this CCL adapter sub, so you are still protected. Your CCL is still protected from flooding in the event that you have to release. Now, the HEP, that's our hydrostatic equalizing plug, is still in the coupling sleeve, but it very seldom needs to be removed now. As you'll see very shortly, the coupling sleeve no longer needs to be removed to do a detonator swap. So we had no issue with leaving that HEP in its existing location. The other area where we were able to get rid of some length was on the fishing neck. Looking at the CF, the earlier CF model, you'll notice that this is an exposed part of the 2-inch fishing neck, and what we did is we just shortened that down with the SR model so that we don't have that space that's taken up there. And by doing that, we eliminated the flex that was associated with the exposed portion of the 2-inch fishing neck. So the meaning for all of you in the field is no more pickup sleeves, so faster well swaps. And in many cases, some locations, this may mean that you don't even have to use a man basket. And the other thing, by getting rid of the flex that was associated with that exposed part of the fishing neck, by getting rid of that flex, that means that the release assemblies that are used inside these tools do not need to be replaced nearly as often as they did before, which substantially reduces the maintenance cost of the tool. Now, still on the outside of the tool, this wrench ring here is carried over from the CF model. Now, many of you, if you had earlier versions of the disconnect, may not have even seen this wrench ring or the spring assist. This is a later addition, but what this wrench ring does is, where we don't have an exposed part of the fishing neck, this allows the user to get a good hold on the fishing neck without physically grabbing the fishing neck with a pipe wrench. So you can put a wrench on the QCA here, a quick change adapter, and a wrench on the wrench ring and make sure that our fishing neck is good and tight with the quick change adapter. Now, speaking of the quick change adapter, you'll notice that the overall length was reduced. We removed the internal connections that were in there, and again, of course, less connections means less possibility for a misrun. It's still the standard 1 5/8 Acme thread, female to female connection that you're used to, but what happens now is a quick change pin actually makes contact with a cupped contact at the bottom of your fishing neck, and you'll notice here that the one side of the QCA has a smaller OD. That is intentional. We did that so that you could put a wrench right here, and if your wrench hung over, it wouldn't be grabbing on the quick change adapter. It would just free float over this reduced OD portion, so that you can make sure that our fishing neck and our quick change adapter are good and tight. You'll also see that we have a place in here for set screws. I know many people don't like using them just because of past experiences where they've been left in and threads torn up, but you'll see here very soon that this tool does not need to be broken down on a regular basis. So That being the case, you may decide that you want to use a set screw. That's up to you. They said this tool does not have to get broken down on a regular basis, and to see why, I'll show you the inside of the tool. Okay, so we're looking at the inside of the tool now. You'll notice that I did get rid of the CF model ADT that I had sitting back here before. Now we have two of the SR models, just this one with the coupling sleeve and the quick change adapter removed so that you can see the inside of the tool. So I've already mentioned that the switch sub that was at the top of the tool before was removed, but we added a seal to the inside of the CCL adapter sub here so that your collar locator won't be flooded in the event of a release. But by getting rid of that switch sub, we were able to get rid of all those extra electrical connections, bulkhead sockets, wiring, etc. So again, less connections, less possibility for a misrun. Now I'm going to skip over the actuator here for just a moment, and I'll come back to that and show you the changes that are in it and the detonator cartridge. But first thing we'll do is we'll go down to the release assembly. Now with the release assembly, you'll see we went from a two-piece to a single-piece design. And the reason for that was we found that there was less stress on the release assembly on the weak point whenever we are continuously picking up and laying down heavy, awkward tool strings going with the single piece. And also we eliminated, that way we eliminated some inconsistencies in the fully assembled release assembly, so that we're ensuring that your detonator is in the proper position whenever we do have to go to release. The other thing you'll see is that there's a groove added to the base of the spline stud. This groove is there to accept two set screws that thread through the fishing neck and lock the fishing neck and the spline stud in position relative to one another. And what that does is it actually locks the fishing neck in place relative to the actuator housing, which makes it totally impossible for it to want to back itself off and come apart on you while you're using it. Now, with all of the changes in this new tool, the release assemblies don't see nearly as much flex as they did before, and therefore they don't need to be replaced nearly as often. So you all wanted a tool with less maintenance costs. That is a substantial cost savings. Okay, so taking a look at the fishing neck here, there's a few changes that have been made other than obviously the overall length. These set screws are threaded into the top here, and again these go into the groove on the release assembly to keep this fishing neck from being able to back its way off of the tool. These set screws are threaded in along these notches that are cut along the lengths of the fishing necks. There's two notches. There's one exactly opposite of the one that you see. And the notches aid in quicker equalization within the tool whenever a release is executed. Once the 226 O-rings that are on the inside of the coupling sleeve have pulled past those notches, these notches act as two additional equalization ports, so it helps to equalize the tool quicker so that you're able to pull the tool apart quicker. And also, while we're in here looking at the fishing neck, I'll spin this around and I'll let you see the change in the design of the spline nuts. The spline nuts here have been reinforced. The design was changed up to offer some forgiveness for the hand-on location who accidentally tightens all the way through the tool. Many of you who have ran our tools before are aware that with previous versions of the addressable disconnect there was an offset key here. There was an open window in the spline nut, and you used an offset key to lock all of these parts in position relative to one another. If the tool is tightened through all the way with a sufficient amount of torque, the material on that spline nut would actually peel up and get jammed in the space between the inside wall of the coupling sleeve and the outer wall of the actuator housing. So what we did with our new reinforced spline nut is we built the two offset keys into the actual spline nut itself, so that we've got two keys going into the two keyway slots on the back of the actuator housing. And the space in between those two we brought out on the spline nut so that it's got a much more rugged connection, so that if somebody does go to tighten through the tool, we're still not recommending that you do, but if somebody were to do that, we're not so worried about them tearing up the tool. Now, as many of you know, there have been a number of other improvements over the past several years, from material selection down to the very small changes and dimensions and a variety of other parts, all to end up with a tool that offers industry-leading consistency and reliability. But what is perhaps the most exciting feature in this new tool is the detonator cartridge system. With our patent-pending system, detonator swaps can be done in less than 5 minutes on location without having to fully tear down the tool and without having to fool with any wiring. To show you just how simple a detonator cartridge swap is with this new tool, we'll go ahead and do one. I've got the SR tool here. You'll notice I'm not going to touch any of these connections down here. This coupling sleeve does not have to come off anymore to do a detonator swap. All that we have to do is unthread our CCL adapter sub here off of the actuator housing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now normally, obviously there would be 227 O-rings in here between these two parts to hold a seal, but for the sake of this demonstration, so I'm not fighting it, I went ahead and removed those. But we're going to unthread our CCLA from our actuator housing. Then I'm going to take our little shunt stick here, plug it into the shunt circuit at the top of the detonator, the top of the detonator cartridge, I should say. So now we've applied a shunt to the top of the detonator cartridge, so that whenever we remove it from the switch shelf, we maintain a shunt. Then I'm going to take my 1032 extraction screw, thread it in to the top of the detonator cartridge. And then I'm just going to remove it. Now you'll notice this with this cartridge, this is just for a demonstration, and there isn't even a detonator in here. But if there were, right now it would be shunted because of this shunt stick we have in. Then what I'll do is I'll take our little primary shunt harness here and plug it in to the cartridge. So now I've applied a shunt here as well. So once I have done that, I'll go ahead and take my extraction screw out, take the shunt stick out, and if there were a live detonator in this detonator cartridge right now, it would be shunted by our shunt harness. So then when I'm ready to put the next detonator in, the next detonator cartridge, I'll go ahead and get my replacement cartridge. Again, for the sake of demonstration, there is not a detonator in here, but assuming there is, what we will do is go ahead and get our replacement detonator cartridge. We'll go ahead and plug our shunt stick into the top of the cartridge. That way we maintain a shunt on our detonator even after we've removed our shunt harness. Then we'll go ahead and plug this into the actuator housing. Remove the shunt stick. Unthread the 1032 screw, and then we'll go ahead and thread our CCLA back onto our actuator housing. Again, normally there would be O-rings there for a seal in between these two parts if it was in the field, but for the sake of demonstration, we've taken it out. And that's it. That is the detonator swap for the SR model addressable disconnect tool. You can see it's very quick, less than 5 minutes. All the while you do maintain a shunt. We are RP67 compliant, so we're keeping your guys safe, and we're changing out detonators very quick, very easy on location. So there's obviously quite a few benefits that come along with this detonator cartridge system. First one being speed. Obviously, detonator swaps can be done in less than 5 minutes on location now. Also, simplicity. The SR model addressable disconnect tool does not need to be fully torn down to swap out detonators, so there's no worries about the wiring or extra seals that may have been compromised in the process of the rebuild. And also, another thing is your detonator cartridges arrive sealed. All the internal connections are made at our shop before they are shipped out, so that's something that you don't have to worry about. And this also eliminates the concerns with the previous models of the tool or the detonator not being positioned properly. As all of you who have ran our tool know that it is important that the detonator is in the proper location for that release mechanism. Another huge benefit is the safety. Obviously, being RP67 compliant, we have these shunt circuits built into the detonator system. It makes it much easier for you all to be safe. The other thing is compliance. There's a much greater chance, we think, that the guys in the field are actually going to be swapping out detonators when they're supposed to, according to the detonator manufacturer recommendations. Because with the swaps being so quick and easy, there's honestly no reason why they shouldn't be done. So our shunt circuits add a safety measure to the detonator cartridge system, not just for when you are swapping out detonators, but also for storage purposes. Good thing is the A105 detonators can be loaded into the cartridge ahead of time, which makes detonator swaps in the field extremely quick and easy. You will receive 2 cartridges with every tool, so you should always have a spare, and obviously more are available if you decide that you need some extra, so that you can always have a surplus of detonator cartridges ready to go when you're on location. Now, how hard is it to change out the detonators in these cartridges? I'll show you. So whenever we're going to swap out the actual detonator in one of these cartridges, it's quite simple. All we have to do is use a Phillips head screwdriver, back these lugs out that are holding the detonator wires. Once we've backed both of those out, we can loosen up this nut, which relieves pressure on the detonator, and then we can just guide the wires out, pull out the detonator, put the new detonator in, and we've shaped the inside of this to where whenever you push those wires down in, you notice there's some notches here, and the wires will find their way to those notches and come out to where they can be wrapped around the lug, so you can tighten down the 2 lugs to make the connections. And then whenever you thread this down, again the O-ring swells around the detonator and holds it in place. There's a shoulder inside our aluminum part here, and that shoulder is there so that whenever you do bottom out this detonator on the inside, you can feel it bottom out and you know that you have the proper position for the detonator before you go to snug it up with this nut. So back to the actuator, there are quite a bit of differences with the SR version of the addressable disconnect tool. One is the switch shelf, which is what makes the whole detonator cartridge system possible. The switch shelf is removable if you ever have to replace it. Also, the harness up at the top of it is replaceable, so there's no need to replace the entire switch shelf when your wires become too short from swapping out your switches. There are 3 wires coming off the back side here. There's a ground, there's the signal coming into the tool going to the switch, and then there's the hot wire going from the switch to the detonator. Now this system can work with any addressable switch out there that we know of. All you have to do is drop the switch into our window here and match up the collar-coded wires. And we do just recommend that you check the schematic of the switch that you're using to make sure that the collars of their wiring do match the collars used on our switch shelf. But then the other wire coming up through here, this blue one that is coming out of a tunnel that's bored through the actuator, is the through wire going out of the tool through the fishing neck. While we're on the actuator, again, I did just mention that there is a tunnel that is bored through the actuator through which we route our through wire. And if you have ran different addressable disconnects, previous versions from us before, you may remember that there was at one point a trench that went through there, and it used screw heads to hold the wire down. So this going with this option gives us a little bit more security, less chance of nicking that wire. You'll see that the window of the actuator here has been opened up to make room for the switch shelf and the switch. The switch fits snug inside this window. The wiring can be run alongside the switch as needed. And then we have a wiring pocket down here underneath on the bottom side of the switch to make room for scotch locks and excess wiring that can all be tucked in right there. Then the OD of the actuator in this area, you'll notice, has been taken down. That's taken down around any areas where there could be wiring to allow for a wrap of tape to keep the wires from getting cut or crushed when the coupling sleeve is threaded back onto the tool. So once we've put that wrap of tape around this section of the actuator here, and we put the coupling sleeve over the actuator and then our HEP. The good thing about all this is the switch and the wiring is all contained inside this pocket, and it doesn't get touched again until you're ready to do a full rebuild on the tool or just change out switches. But the wiring is kept on the top side of the switch shelf, while the detonator cartridge is on the bottom side of the switch shelf in the bore of the actuator. So whenever you're in the field, this wiring is not in any risk of getting pinched by the guys in the field changing out their detonator cartridges. So in determining how often you need to get into this tool to change out your addressable switch, we just recommend that you follow your switch manufacturer guidelines for their replacement intervals. But the awesome thing about this new tool is that with this new detonator cartridge system, it's entirely possible that you could take a couple tools out to start a job and only have the guys on location worry about changing out their detonators as needed. You can have a couple competent technicians in your shop that can be trusted with the more intricate details of the tool, who will be responsible for rebuilding the tools in between jobs, or just send the tools back to us to be rebuilt. We'll thoroughly go over and QC the tools and all the parts that come back to us for rebuilds to be sure that your tool's ready for the next job. Whatever the case, the big thing here is the rebuild frequency and maintenance cost of the tool has been drastically reduced with this new design. Now, of course, we do recommend you be mindful of extreme wellbore conditions that may require more frequent rebuilds. If you're getting into extreme temperatures or caustic environments, obviously take those things into consideration when you are determining how often you want to rebuild this tool. Now, to all of you out there who are existing customers of ours, we want to make sure you are aware that many of these modifications can be made to earlier models of your ICSI addressable disconnect tools to incorporate some of the improvements made in the SR model into your existing tools. The reinforced spline nut that was redesigned to make the tool stand up better to someone trying to tighten through it is backwards compatible with earlier models, as is the shorter fishing neck and the shorter quick change adapter with the wrench ring. Those are all changes that can be made to make earlier models of the addressable disconnect tool shorter and make it more rugged, similar to the SR model, and to eliminate the need for utilizing pickup sleeves on location. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, by all means reach out to your local ICSI representative and we can get you some more information on that. So there you have it. It's the SR model addressable disconnect tool from Innovative Completion Systems. It's the disconnect tool that all of you in the field helped us build. It's shorter, it's simpler, it's able to be run with a variety of addressable switch systems. It can be run without a pickup sleeve. It can be tightened through. It makes detonator swaps extremely quick and easy. It's much cheaper to maintain. It uses our proven release mechanism that's had years of refinement and perfection, and it's more rugged than its competition. So I just want to thank you so much again for your time. We know that it's valuable. We'd love to get one of the new SR model ADTs in your hands so you can really check it out. So please feel free to reach out to your local ICSI representative. We'll set up a time that works for you to really show you this exciting new innovation in the ICSI family of disconnect tools. So thank you again so much for your time, and from our family to yours, be blessed and be safe.